everybody. I'm Josh Welch, president of Film Independent, and welcome to a very special edition of Film Independent Presents, where we get to have a conversation with the filmmaker of Acasa, My Home. And before we get started, I just want to thank a couple people. First of all, thanks to the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, who is the lead sponsor of Film Independent Presents. We are so appreciative of your support. It's enabled us to stay connected with our community throughout this very challenging year, and for that we are so thankful. And then I also want to thank Vision Media, our screening platform partner in this venture. Thank you to everyone at Vision Media for all the technical support, for helping get the films out there. We really appreciate it. And then lastly, I'm really here today. One of the great things, let me back up. There's nothing great about living through this COVID moment, but one of the unexpected pleasures is how doing things online has enabled us to really broaden our community and have conversations with people all over the world. And I've been so struck by people's desire to be part of that conversation and willingness. And as long as you can juggle the time zones, things work out. So today we have the director of Acasa coming in from Europe, and then from New York, we have our moderator, Debra Granik. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Debra. Debra is a filmmaker. I'm sure if you're watching this, you know Debra's films, but she's somebody that we have known and admired at Film Independent from the very beginning of her career. In 2004, she made Down to the Bone, which was recognized at the Spirit Awards the following year, nominated for the Cassavetes Award. Then in 2010, she had Winter's Bone, totally remarkable film that got lots of nominations at the Spirit Awards. In 2015, she had her documentary, Stray Dog, also celebrated at the Spirit Awards. And then in 2019, Debra won the Bonnie Award at the Spirit Awards and was nominated for her most recent film, Leave No Trace. And on the extremely off chance that you don't know Debra's work, I urge you to go out and watch all of her films. It's a remarkable body of work. And Debra is also such another thing that we look for, totally separate from the quality of work at Film Independent, are filmmakers who are supportive of the community, of people in it, of younger filmmakers, somebody who really sees the value in the space of independent film beyond her own work. And I feel like Debra embodies that so much and is such a champion of great filmmaking, as well as a practitioner. So with that, I will stop blathering on and just say, Debra, thank you for being here. Radu, it's lovely to meet you. And with that, I turn it over to the two of you.
You just made us feel really good.
Good.
Well, it's such a delight for me to participate in this conversation, because just moments before the Zoom started, I was saying to Radu that, I had such a kind of fortified workout from this film, and I mean that in the best way, right? And I just threw out this phrase, like a philosophical gymnasium, that I loved, that for the days that ensued after I watched the film, I was asking myself multiple times a day, what were the trade-offs? How do we look at decisions that a set of people make? What are the ramifications? It was just this cascade of questions, good questions. And I was just marveling that this film detonated this series of questions in my thoughts. And so, of course, for me, that is the supreme compliment that I want to open up with, just when a film works on you, works with you, works against you, but makes you work, and I think in a time when we get a lot of fragments, having a long rumination and contemplation is itself a rich thing to have. So I thank you very much for giving a lot of people around the world an opportunity to follow your journey making this film.
Well, thank you for these very, very kind words. Apart from the fact that are coming from you, which you are one of my favorite directors, Leave No Trace for me was a major inspiration. I think it's always a challenge to make something, to tell a story in a deep way, in a more profound way, but also make it accessible. And I'm not going to use the word entertaining, but still, I think the true privilege of telling these kinds of story is that you can actually create an experience where the audience, where other human beings can go through these major questions that we all have, and with most of the time we dodge, but also in a way that doesn't feel like that doesn't feel so heavy, let's say, that doesn't feel as a challenge. And I'm very glad that we managed to to find this balance. And yeah, in order to reach to reach as many people with our questions and our let's say philosophical struggles.
Yeah. Yeah. And I picked up on the fact that this phrase immediately, this, of course, I feel naturally goes into this concept of non-judgmentalness, right? Not having to know in a black or white or an absolute way, is their lifestyle good or bad? Is the father making good or bad decisions? Is he a good father or a bad father? Are the children suffering, or are they in a freer status? Even the question of wanting to know absolutely, is a certain kind of expansive life in a park in any way we want to quantify? Is it better than urban poverty, than going to a city where you will be a third-class citizen by virtue of your poverty? So I just outlined about a dozen stark binary dilemmas that the film addresses, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not binary. I just meant we want a binary answer. We want good or bad. And film doesn't do it,
Absolutely. I mean, it's at the end of the day, we're storytellers are human beings as well, and we all have preconceptions, and we are all forged by cultures, by culture in general, by by our geographic space, by our family, by our neighbors, and so on. So indeed, I mean, we wanted to tell a story that would give enough space for our characters to tell the world as it is from their own perspective. And this is not something easy. I mean, you can formalize it, let's say, in journalism, you have objectivity, which is something very, very outdated and old, if you ask me, as a journalist. And in journalism, you sell it as a truth. You have some guidelines, and if you respect that, like you're formalizing, let's say, an information, a story, in order for it to stand as being truthful. But it never is. It's there's no objectivity, and there's no there's only individualism, let's say. There's only these small tiny loopholes that we all have, and that we perceive the world. So the challenge was to actually spend enough time and in a humane way sometimes, and most of the times, even without the cameras, just to get to know these people, just to understand them, and by doing this, to find the means in which to show their reality through their own perspectives, even the struggles, even the confusion, in like their inner confusion. I'd say it's a very good word, and dilemmas. And it was quite a long process, but also, like, my team and myself, like the core team of the film, we're all coming from narrative journalism, and we applied a lot of our research, let's say, methods, because we're writers. We are used to stay as long as possible with our stories, and then like just write it all down and go through endless sessions of editing and debating, which is something that we did with the film. But it was quite a privilege to manage to do this in the space of a film, which is a lot more expensive, a lot more challenging. You know, there's a lot more people involved and so on. And so, and I think this is one of the struggles of the filmmaker that tries to capture the intimacy or the truth, the truthful moments in reality, and you know, just to show the world through those moments. So I think from this point of view, we were truly privileged, and yeah.
I hear your small person.
And I was hoping that you,
No,
yeah.
no, I'm just acknowledging the and that you're having a late night work session, and you're, you know, the smallest member of your household has also some needs. You know, it's related to the film. You know, the theme.
The mother is she's also hardworking. My partner Lina Vdovy is actually the writer of the film. She's in the other room doing another Q&A for one of those her stories. So we're hoping.
And the baby's doing their own Q&A. You know.
Yeah, I'm gonna if that's okay, Rachel, in 5 minutes, if she's still crying, can I take a break of this is not live, right? Like I just need 2 minutes just to calm her down. Just
Yeah,
5 minutes.
of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I know you understand me.
Oh, we totally understand. Yeah, no, luckily that sound is universal. We don't even have to know what language she's crying in. It's universal. So I think what you've led me to is just one little aside I wanted to say, just filmmaking, because we're talking among filmmakers, and that's kind of refreshing, right? That you and I can talk shop, actually, which is, I wanted to just note how little it takes to the economy of some of the things you did in the film, and just sort of speak to the editing of the process, where you don't need much to tell everybody, to convey that it's hard to come in from one lifestyle and one way of living and be shown your first set of literacy lessons, you know, your first lessons of what it takes to learn how to acquire reading language and reading skills late in life, right? Like, so I just wanted to ask whether that was ever a dilemma for you in the filmmaking aspect on the editing side. You know, did you feel like you needed to show many examples, or you know, go for that one, which is, what did you mean how did you choose among your instances to show like dad's side and dad's choices versus maybe son's needs and son's choices?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of years, I had my own issues with the father, with Jika, because he encapsulated a lot of my father's flaws. Mm-hmm. This true patriarch. My father was and he's still you know, like he's still alive, but he's an intellectual, but he's very proud, you know, but being raised in a quite Soviet culture, he became a patriarch himself. So I had some I didn't necessarily get along with Jika's ideas. We were friends and we had a good relationship, but it was very hard for me to embrace him as he is for a lot of time. And not until I became a parent myself that I realized that that we can do a lot of things, sometimes atrocious things, in order to protect our loved ones. So from that point on, I managed to give him a bit more space in my mind, as well as in the film. Yeah. And try to build the proper context around him, in order for him to not to be seen or not to be perceived as either black or white, as I was seeing him for so many years, but as a human being that had some experiences, and based on those experiences, he took some choices. And the choices that he made, he didn't make necessarily out of his didn't come necessarily from his darkness, but from his fears of being abused or being or being left out, being left without his loved ones, as it happened before. He was quite well. He had a really good life. I met his sister. I met his other siblings, and they're middle class people. By the way, his sister works for an American agricultural multinational, and she goes on 2 vacations per year and so on. So she's quite. He comes from quite a good family, but because he had some extreme, let's say, experiences back in the 90s in Romania, where everything was very gray and very confusing for a lot of people after the revolution, when the communism fell, and a lot of people were lost, including him. So he ended up in a very bad prison. He wasn't necessarily the criminal type, but he got out with a lot of traits from the people that he met there, in order for him to feel a bit more protected. And I guess his time in prison caused him a lot of pain and a lot of wounds that followed him through the years. And this decision of isolating himself with the intention of protecting himself and his family came from those experiences back then. So having understood this, obviously it was easier for me not to point fingers towards him and saying that he's a bad father or a bad parent. That he's of course there's a lot of the things that I wouldn't do, never do, that and he, in relationship with my children, that he did with his. But at the end of the day, you never know how this world can change you, and how you can end up believing that maybe isolating yourself with your loved ones in a forest is the best thing that you can do for yourself and for your family. And I know you understand this very well, because probably you thought about this a lot in your process in doing Leave No Trace, right?
Absolutely. And I was there was no way to not dwell and think the whole process about the aftermath of trauma. Absolutely. And sort of under-recognized sources of trauma in the development in men's lives, and to certainly prison has post-traumatic stress. Like you say, a bunch of decisions will be based on the way that your brain readapts to imprisonment and threat of danger. And, so but what's interesting is, like a narrative, you couldn't really give all that backstory. You didn't have the father having extensive interviews about his past and what had happened to him. So in that way, you did that very audacious decision to sort of start your documentary in the here and now and keep it in the here and now. I can't even remember. I don't think you showed past times at all, right? So I think that's a very, that's one of the really big challenges with storytelling when trauma is in the character's past, right? How do we ever allow or, share that intel with the audience, and then what happens if you don't? And I think when you don't, you leave room for this other kind of huge interpretation, but also exercise, which is something I just was excited to bring up today, which is this phrase that I had to look up the definition. I had to look it up because it's a literary phrase, and I wish I had looked it up so I could say it to you in your mother tongue. But in English, it's called negative capability, right? And it's a literary phrase. I have the definition. I could even just shoot you one sentence, because the definition is actually beautiful. I think you will love it. And when you Google it later, I mean, lots of people that have taken literary history and stuff and studied literature in depth know this phrase. But for me as a filmmaker, it's still got this novel power. I'm putting on my reading glasses because I'm actually going to read the Wikipedia definition, which I thought was quite beautiful, which is the capacity of poets, note takers, documenters, writers to pursue a vision of beauty or mystery, even when it leads them to intellectual confusion and uncertainty. You know, so being able,
spot on, isn't it?
yeah. So being able to say, Vali and Rika, the children running through the reeds, even the desire of the population of the big city to want to preserve the Delta, all these different emotions that are charged on this piece of land. There is beauty, no matter what's happening, no matter how sort of poor the economic resources of the family are in their kind of tent shack. The fact that those boys run and the fact that those boys and the children know where to find things, they know the seasons, you know, all this natural knowledge they have of the world around them. You can't take that beauty away. That is a raw, bold kind of beauty. And I felt that you took a risk to stick with this idea of negative capability, that you were willing to look at all the ands. It's exquisite where they live in this wetlands, and real pain occurs, real risks occur, and
your ends are my butts is always like, it's very beautiful, but you know, it's very tragic, but it's very patriarchal, but you know, so
yeah.
for me there's commas or but or however's. So I totally emphasize with what you said about that beauty, that rawness, that almost touching the roots of our existence, and you know, like within a frame as simple as some children running in a sunset in the tall bushes, and that kind of made me stay and convinced me that this is a story that has so much potential, and because of the depth that I wasn't necessarily seeing in front of my research years, but the possibilities of you know, of telling a story that can actually be meaningful. And it's also a thing of disposition, you know, of openness as well. Probably if I would have seen those kids running in the tall bushes now, that time, you know, I have 110 problems with the baby and with other projects, with responsibilities that I didn't have 4 years ago. Probably I wouldn't necessarily have the openness to receive all that. So it's also a question of what space are you in when you're trying to go past these confusions, you know, or find solutions to not answers to these questions, or finding a frame to understand this fuzziness around you better. And because, you know, like we kind of need little boxes in order to understand the world around us. We need the structure, we need and the problems are arising when this structure doesn't correspond to the reality you're facing, isn't it? And we have to build, you know, like better understandings and so on. And this is how we grow. So again, this is another privilege of being in this position of searching for little bits of truths and telling little or big stories, or big stories inside little events.
Yeah. But I think something that strikes me that I don't want, you know, of course, I don't want to be almost like reductive and put, you know, some of the trends in European documentary filmmaking on a pedestal and, you know, be all weird about it. But as, you know, again, just having to deal, especially this week, having to deal with my Americanness, you know, you know, one of the things I struggle in my own filmmaking culture with is the idea that you have to have proof, you know, you know, and there has to be a conclusion, and it can't be open-ended. That somehow we've got to land somewhere, you know, one of these series, streaming series, it has to land on the side of something. And I know we kind of talked about this, our whole discussion has been in service to this, but I just wanted to say that there's something, and I think I'm not alone, I think a lot of American filmmakers are interested in the space that we perceive across the ocean for the idea that a film doesn't have to land in a specific conclusion. You know, do you feel that in your community, you guys are pushing back against some of the sort of global streaming pressures to have tighter stories that prove their point? You know,
I mean, obviously that's a very American trait of telling a story. But I don't come necessarily from filmmaking, but from writing, and it's it's the whole experience. I mean, what I wanted to say is just that I recently discovered dramaturgy, which is something quite for me, it was a beautiful and brilliant add-on to my experience as a researcher, writer, journalist, and so on. It opened up the world to me. And coming from a journalism, the side of me, I would say that yeah, you need to land things. You need to land your conclusion somewhere, and you need to pass on your learnings, and you need to make it easier for people to understand what you did there, because you were the only one who was on the field for months or years researching a story. So you must understand, you know, like this is your service. This, you know, this is the whole service. You know, you absorb, and then you conclude. You know, like you pass on the conclusion. You make it easier for people to understand the world around them, which is one way of doing things. And I respect that 100%. I am a fan. Sometimes I'm in the mood to watch stories or read, you know, like stories that are very, you know, like tight and aim very, you know, like in a perfect way. But for me, this, I mean, this whole, I mean, learning about dramaturgy made me feel that this story is one of those stories that you kind of need to you kind of need to understand by yourself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It's because it's I mean, for me, it landed in a conclusion, but it's not one of those, let's say, objective, formal conclusions. For me, it's about the loss of innocence. It's about being what's generally known as becoming what's generally known as being an adult. You know, taking up the responsibilities and being part of this very more or less complex net socially and so on. So for me, it was always about this. For me, the last scene of the film is this boy that lost his innocence and came back to the place that once that where he was shining in so many ways, and he comes back and now and something is lost. And this is for me that was the conclusion. And even though it's not you know, like it's not there written, it was a very inspiring truth for me to tell. Maybe because I started the story when I was 26, 27, and then, you know, like it's that time of life when you kind of realize that you need to push the buttons, get your skates on, and you know, like face the life, and it's that time of life when you kind of forget that, you know, like you go further away from your roots and from the things that made you feel safe, made you feel loved, made you feel accepted, as further away from home, which is the original place where we're living to become our own selves, and in a position of building our own homes, and because we miss our roots, we miss our the, you know, like childhood, and the feeling of carelessness, and heaven, basically Eden.
Yeah, yeah. But I feel like in that sense, it was a little surprising in a positive way that a lot of forces around them, a lot of contemporary social forces of the big city across the river, were actually willing to demonstrate some tolerance and some benevolence. I mean, like, you know, the fact is, it was kind of, I don't know, almost like a really positive element that there was this decision to try to preserve this piece of land, the Delta area, and the idea that, I mean, it kind of blew my mind that they were the sort of community of scientists and rangers and bureaucrats and city people that were going to organize this, the policymakers, were trying on some level to acknowledge the family as a stakeholder. You know,
It was quite amazing,
yeah,
and it's a credit that I always like to give for the campaigners that managed to, that discovered the place, that studied it, that managed to pull off that very high protection status for what was basically a garbage dump
yeah,
in the middle of the city. And they came from a quite ethical, let's say, they were academics, and they weren't political people, let's say, and they tried to find a solution of integrating the family somehow in their project. They managed to do informally. This is maybe, and this was actually gave us the opportunity to get close to Jika, because he was already working again informally with these campaigners for some years as the local fixer, local ranger during this campaign. And fortunately and unfortunately as well, they couldn't build him a house there. It is illegal to build in natural reservations. So, but they still supported the family. You know, Acasa is also a social project. I'm not going to go into details, but it was quite a complex method of helping the family have a smoother or less dramatic integration into the life in the city. So we had specialists from all over the city, and they did a great job in helping this family stay together, basically, and not ending up on the streets or in one of those dark shelters. And these campaigners have always been supporters of this project by donating, by hiring 3 of the Enake members in their project, and because it was also a question of like what would they do with all the what would they do with all that knowledge, you know, Jika and Vali, and
yeah.
I mean they have a great deal of knowledge about that place that is basically useless in you know, outside that delta. So we were extremely lucky to have them as partners in this whole in these whole efforts of trying to make things a bit better for the family. And yeah,
It makes me think about zones of tolerance and self-esteem, and what when you know, the power of seeing an outside group of people acknowledge the skill set that Jika and the sons just to acknowledge, I see in you this vast, profound knowledge of this delta and this and the land and the cycles and the animals and and I was just, that's like, we don't get to see that too enough of that, I think, and I was thinking a lot about red and blue issues over here and what you do and do not see in the hillbilly and the other, all these terms we have for a person whose skills don't fit neatly into urban capitalism. But
his potential, his potential doesn't correspond with your own needs of producing.
But I do want to say, because we have we're in a community right now of filmmakers who are, interested in this discussion, that you do have really rich information that you've shared about both the project that you got involved with, and also even how you had access. Filmmakers care a lot, right? How did he have access? And I know we don't have to go into all of that, but that there is some information that you've been very generous in sharing about the background of the production and how you went from the kind of journalistic techniques into the filmmaking techniques. And but I do want to stop 1 second just on this notion of the project, only because there are very few filmmakers who don't wrestle with the idea of what's the exchange, right? If any of us get involved in documenting extensively a set of individuals who are doing something that we find to be compelling or mysterious, curious, attractive, whatever it is, heinous, whatever it is, what is the exchange that we are establishing? Because, it's certainly not monetary, right? Unless it's being contexted that way, unless you're saying, okay, for this really salacious series, you will get paid X amount to kill this certain kind of thing or to perform these outrageous acts, or, be it bestial, sexual, whatever it is, you will be paid to be bad and you will be paid to hunt this kind of animal or whatever it is. But we're not talking about that kind of scripted nonfiction. We're not talking about the idea of salacious entertainment that has kind of been shoved into the nonfiction world, so to speak. So given that we're not talking about that, what we are talking about is that people have consented to work with us. They've given us permission to return time and again, to photograph them over years or months. And we don't just hit and run, right? It's not a hit and run, that expression from a hit and run accident,
Of course, yeah. I come from a profession of hit and run, so.
Okay, right. But this one, this was not a hit and run, right? I mean, there was no part of you. And so that's why you have that project. That's why you got involved. That's why you couldn't not get involved. There was no way for you to not get involved. And that's very messy, that could slow anyone down, right? I mean, did that not slow you down sometimes?
Yeah, but I obviously, yes.
Yeah.
It broke my heart in so many, in so many instances. When you spend the time with someone, you spend the day and you can befriend someone and then keep in touch for your whole life. Imagine spending years with someone you're building up through this exchange of experiences. You're building the relationship, and of course things are affecting you, and of course you don't want to see your close ones or your friends suffering. So you get involved, and but I think it was quite a struggle for me, for us, for the whole team, ethically. I also did in my last year's investigations, and in my 20s I used to do these undercover investigations in factories, and then so I was quite jumpy when it came to journalistic ethics. Because of course there were the moral issues, but obviously when you're working with or against powerful forces, there's always legal risks and so on. So I was quite formed, let's say, professionally formed in this way of like not interfering and helping as much as you can within this frame that keeps you quite safe professionally and keeps your work safe, basically.
Yeah.
So when we again, I'm returning to the idea of being open, of like in certain times of your life you're open to things, and so I was when the relationship with this family started to evolve, I was questioning my own set of values and the ways I was seeing this story, and then and then and there was instances where I was in the position of power of helping the family, or at least if not helping, like making things a bit easier for them. So and this was a continuous discussion for some times, for some years, I would say. But and I think this is one of the most beautiful realizations for me professionally, but also personally, coming or uh, going inside this new, let's say, way of telling a story, which where you have a lot more creative freedom, where you have a lot more space or freedom of um, editing, of thinking things, and drawing conclusions and so on. It's you have the luxury of actually, for me it was a luxury of becoming in a lot of ways human myself. So slowly but surely I started to evaluate things or this kinds of situation from a humane point of view, rather than a journalistic one.
Mm.
And that was one of the gifts of the whole process for me. Of course, you get involved when you like when people around you are suffering. It's like, I mean, you wouldn't become a journalist if you wouldn't care about the people around you,
Right.
from the first
Absolutely.
place, So it's although it may sound infantile, it was part of my process of becoming a bit more mature, maybe professionally even. And right now I only want to do films, so which is something that I do.
Yeah, but that's also because of that beautiful phrase from Claire Denis, which is, you were talking about the limits of what you would experience in the actual traditional journalism, and there was one piece you left out that I was thinking about, which is that you were using images to say some things that words can't say, right? Something about the way it felt for those two boys to be in the boat as the sun is going down, and they're listening for the frogs, or what their observation. You could say, oh, you could get one of the kids to tell you that they know a lot about the wetlands and the reeds, but you just showed it, in ways that there weren't actual words. You showed that there was almost like intuitive knowledge that they were developing. But the last thing I wanted to say about this notion of involvement was just that I always ask this question of, when I get involved, and I felt almost comforted by your involvement. I felt very validated as a filmmaker by your involvement, because I struggle, like, oh, I'm ruining the project because I'm becoming involved. There's supposed to be this frontier, this barrier. But one thing I realized about involvement is that the people that you're working with want you to finish the film. Once you've shown up for 4 years, and once you've expressed that you're intrinsically, day in and day out, invested in their well-being, their nobility, they have skin in the game. They want their life experiences to add up so they can have perspective as well. So they can take a step back and look at issues of their life, So I just wanted to say that I think the fact that you're being very open about your involvement, your personal involvement, is a very generous act for filmmakers. I think many filmmakers crave to hear how their peers, how their colleagues handle that kind of involvement. So I just wanted to add that to my list of thanks.
Thank you for saying this. I actually became more confident in embracing this whole involvement in the film by listening to another filmmaker talking about how she got involved and how at the end of the day she took the decision to edit the film by showing by focusing on the universality of the story rather than by showing what she did there, particularly did there to help her characters and so on, which is something that I did. I mean, a lot of the 300 hours of the footage that we shot was actually about how these very nice people were trying to find a solution for a family that was struggling in this new bureaucratic world, to say the least. So, but like it gave me a bit more courage to decide that this way of telling this story, this film, is the best story I could tell, the best 86 minutes I could take out of those 300 minutes, 300 hours that we had.
But even that is such an inspiration to think about distillation. That's a big number differential, 386, 300, and I feel like almost like we could close on that benediction for ourselves, to have the stamina to keep distilling 300 hours of life and experience and negative capability, and try our hardest to keep going, to then emerge with something that's viewable, that has sorted and organized, and maybe I'm channeling my editing partner right now as she's toiling with these hours and hours, and she's trying to do the same thing. And all editors, maybe we take a moment to praise all editors right now.
Oh God, yes. But the one of the, let's say, one of the great advice that I never got was to actually listen to people, especially when you're in these very fuzzy parts of your like stages of your project. Listen to people, listen to your editor, and coming from journalism and working with so many editors made me realize the value of co-creation and co-solving problems. The film is one problem that's made out of 1 million other problems. So.
Oh man, Radu, the world is changing, and you are part of that change, and it is beautiful. It is really beautiful because, remember, you were young. Maybe, I don't even know if you were a tiny kid, but do you remember when the Danish folks came out with their dogma? It was called Dogma 95. Do you remember this at all? It was a movement out of Denmark in the mid 90s. I feel like maybe I loved what they did, only because I love that they were just making an international statement that we could all respond to. I just liked the idea that someone was throwing questions into the global cauldron, and I feel like maybe you and your team can start, I don't know, the dogma was a joke. It wasn't a dogma to press on people. It was a dogma to provoke, to fight against, kind of fight with it. But I would love it if some Euro makers would come up with a few dogmas to throw out in the world so we could discuss it when COVID's over. We could get in a room.
Why not?
Why not?
We can do it now. So we don't have work, so we might as well.
That's true. But what I was going to say is just what you just said, just being able to comfortably acknowledge the profound nature of collaboration. That was never on anyone's list. It was always like, oh, single genius. I just do it all,
They still do it.
I was hanging on how how just helpful it is to hear you foreground collaboration.
Thank you so much. It's been a true pleasure.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
likewise,
I've been
likewise.
talking about this meeting for days now with all my friends, and it's been really exciting to get to exchange some thoughts with you. And I'm watching very closely of like for your work, and fingers crossed. Like I hope to see at least 20 other films. So
Oh,
I
God.
hope you live long enough.
I know, but they, like you, some of them take a long time. We don't want them to all take that amount of time. I'm trying to figure out, I'm now in my notebook, in my dream notebook, I have one section for any documentary that I could make in 1 year. Like make some rule that that the subject has to be done within just one time in my life. Try it. I want to try it once.
Well, write a book after you solve that mystery, and I'm going to be one of the buyers.
Okay. All right. Till the next time, we'll talk about that next time. Time limits on documentary. But yes. Oh wow. Thank you so much. And I think your baby went to sleep.
She did, like 20 minutes ago.
It's beautiful. Yay. All right. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.